So I think that answers your question.
I don't understand why it's a hard question to answer.
Ultimate dodgeball.
Well, John, I think the president has been clear, the vice president has been clear, and I think I was really clear just now.
This is Ultimate Dodgeball.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
You've been a bad boy, Jeffrey.
What we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Bryan Fischer.
Howdy, and welcome to a brand new broadcast edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Bryan Fischer is my name. The program is Focal Point, and I am your host, Bryan Fischer, congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent.
As always.
Jeff and Bobby in the house after, well, you guys had to use bobsleds and snowmobiles and ice skates to get to work today. That is dedication to the task. So anyway, good to have you guys here. Good to have you guys in the conversation as we go forward today. Very quickly, just want to remind you that you can audio stream this program live from anywhere in the world at afr.net. You can video and audio stream this program on our Focal Point Bryan Fischer Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. You can get podcasts at afr.net, or better yet, download a podcast app and subscribe to Focal Point. It'll pop up every single day. Never need to miss an episode. My handle on Twitter is at Bryan J. Fischer. Also, don't forget, if you get the father of a 12-year-old boy who's coming up on a birthday, you might want to think about going to afastore.net and pick up a copy of the Boy to Man book, my book on fatherhood, to give to him, to help him as he raises his son to maturity. All right, well, let's turn our attention to the news of the day. Before we get into the word, I want to just take a minute. You've heard by now, certainly, that Rush Limbaugh has died this morning. His wife informed everybody. So he is now, and we'll tell you where he is right now by the words that come out of his own mouth. So you want to hang on for that. But I just, I think as Americans, anybody that's in talk radio owes an irreplaceable, unpayable debt to Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh was the best talk show host in the history of media, in the history of radio, in the history of television. There'll never be another one like him. He was the Michael Jordan, the Joe Montana, the Jerry Rice, and the Tom Brady of the talk show industry. So he's going to be missed, left an indelible footprint, can't be replaced. Nobody's going to be able to replace him. Debbie and I were talking about who's going to take over his show. I don't think anybody can.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the one that built that show. The advertisers are there because of him. Nobody else has the same, whatever the complement of gifts that he had to bring to the table. Nobody else in the history of radio has that combination of gifts. So he's literally, I think, is irreplaceable. I don't know what will happen. Obviously, I'm not a part of any of that. Don't know anything what's going on, any of the conversations. But I think it's going to be just impossible to find somebody that could step into his shoes. So he meant a lot to all of us. And, and one of the things that people wondered about, and let me mention this first of all, the left fancies themselves, don't they, as the ones who are compassionate and who are tolerant. We're the ones that are hateful and punitive and all that kind of stuff. Well, here's just some. I mean, this is just a smidgen of what's already come out on social media about Rush Limbaugh. Here's what David Burge, this isn't a criticism, this is an observation he makes. He's not agreeing with us that he hates Rush Limbaugh, but he says, have you ever noticed that politics turns your soul into a fetid abyss of hate. And that's what America's wallowing in right now. It's a beautiful turn of phrase, a fetid abyss of hate, simply because he said things that people did not agree with, and he said them in a way that you couldn't refute. Very powerful, very persuasive. Another one said on social media, some people think that grave dancing is a competitive sport, referring to the number of people celebrating his passing. And, a lot of rest in blank, not rest in peace, but rest in a word that sounds like that. That's trending on Twitter. So that's how they're saying goodbye to this man who meant so much to America. Rush Limbaugh has passed on, but not his memory. His memory lives on through bigots everywhere. Good riddance, you scumbag. You leave a legacy of irreparable damage done to our country in your path. Too bad hell doesn't exist. Ciao, this poster says. And here's a few other examples. He will be remembered, picked these up off Twitter this morning, he will be remembered as the racist, misogynistic, homophobe he unapologetically lived as. Power on. This is a person celebrating. My power is on at least long enough to make food and a pot of coffee. And Rush Limbaugh died? Man, when it rains blessings, it truly pours. Here's another one, says, thoughts and prayers with everyone who was unfairly maligned, targeted, and abused by Rush Limbaugh and his venal acolytes, of which I am one, over his decades of hateful spewing. Here's another. Glad he's dead. I hope it was painful. Rush Limbaugh putting a smile on my face for the first time ever today. Last one that I have on my list here. Rest in peace, Rush Limbaugh. You taught me it was okay to single-handedly poison an entire generation of boomers with rage-inducing right-wing misinformation while being cretinous. So that's the world saying goodbye to Rush Limbaugh. I praise his memory. And let's talk for a minute about where he was at in his relationship with God, and specifically in his relationship with Christ. And Jeff, I think you've got a little bit of light to shed on that subject.
Yeah, to the end, Rush Limbaugh publicly credited his faith in Jesus with getting him through some very serious battles with cancer. Here I have a quote from him. He said, I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. It is of immense value, strength, confidence, and that's why I'm able to remain fully committed to the idea that what is supposed to happen will happen when it's meant to. He said that during one of his final programs. So,
all right, so and by words that come out of his mouth, saying he is a believer in Jesus Christ, who has been an immense help to him, he says, immense strength to him, given him confidence to face whatever is coming, why he believes that what's happening in his life is according to the will of God because of his faith in Jesus Christ. So, Rush Limbaugh has been welcomed into through the doors of heaven, and I believe Rush Limbaugh has already heard the words, well done, thou good and faithful servant.
And just a side note, his brother, David Limbaugh, we've had him on the program, interviewed him a couple times. He's a very strong believer, wrote some very convincing, almost apologetic type books about Christ and the deity of Christ. So it sounds like there's going to be some comfort there, at least in his family.
Well, and the good news is it sounds like maybe that runs in the family, that strain of genuine faith in Jesus Christ. That had to come from somewhere. I don't know much about the faith of his father, but I'm guessing he probably was a man who was a worshiper of Christ, maybe not as visibly as others, but was in his heart and in his life. All right, so that's a sad day for me because I admired Rush Limbaugh, looked up to him, thought he was the best that ever was or ever will be. You know, you can't say that about very many people in their chosen profession. You know, just when you think Joe Montana is the greatest of all time, along comes a Tom Brady. I thought there would never be anybody who could exceed what Joe Montana could do as a leader on the football field. Tom Brady came along, 7 Super Bowl champions, blew that away. So you almost never can say he's the best that ever was or ever will be. But I think I can safely say with regard to Rush Limbaugh, nobody ever is going to be better than he was. All right, well, let's turn our attention to the Word of God. This is going to swing over into the next segment because of the amount of content that I have. But I want to talk about global warming for a second, and you'll see how it connects to our reading this morning in the book of Job. You can read along with us. You can pray along with us at pray.afa.net. Today we're in Job 38 through chapter 40, verse 5. You know, and let's see. We've got have an Anderson Cooper clip in here talking with Bill Gates. Can you find that for me? Where do I have that? Thought I had that. I guess maybe I don't.
Number 7, maybe?
Well, let me get there. Second page here. Oh, yeah. There we go. It snuck down to the bottom of the page, so I didn't see it. Now, here is Bill Gates talking to Anderson Cooper about global warming, and listen to what Bill Gates had to say about this, clip 7.
You believe this is the toughest challenge humanity has ever faced?
Absolutely. The amount of change, new ideas, it's way greater than the pandemic, and it needs a level of cooperation that would be unprecedented.
So that's Bill Gates. There's no question that this is the greatest crisis, greatest challenge that humanity, that means every living human being on the face of the earth, this is the biggest challenge that anybody on earth is ever going to face, or that humanity collectively will ever face. Going to require an unprecedented amount of cooperation to get this thing taken care of. Now, I got news for Bill Gates. If Bill Gates thinks that global warming is the biggest problem humanity is facing, he's got an even bigger problem. His problem, our problem, is not the climate. Our problem is God. Bill Gates has a God problem, not a global warming problem. Why do I say that? Because the Bible and what we're going to look at in the book of Job today makes it abundantly clear that God and God alone is in charge of the climate. He's in charge of the weather around the entire globe. There's no weather event that isn't his responsibility, that he hasn't allowed or brought to serve his purposes. Listen, this is what Job says. We're just going to start with a couple of these. It says in verse 8 of Job 38, God is the one. Remember, this is where God is talking to Job. Who is it that darkens counsel with his impertinence? That's God speaking to Job. And Job all of a sudden said, oops, I think I miscalculated on this whole deal, where God's wrong and I'm right. Who is this that darkens counsel by coming into my presence? Not a happy start for the last conversation in the book of Job. But here's what God says to Job. Look, you think you're so smart. I got some questions for you, Mr. Smarty Pants. You think you're so smart? You think you're smarter than I am? You think you know enough to correct me, to challenge me, to tell me that I'm wrong? I have some questions for you, and we'll get into those questions when we come back. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
The words of Jeremiah, the son of Hilkiah, of the priests who were in...
Not clear.
And welcome back to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. Bryan Fischer is my name. Jeff and Bobby alongside, and this is the home of muscular Christianity. Great to have you in the conversation today. Now I want to go back to what we were talking about before the end of the first segment, and I want to talk about Job in connection with this fascination with global warming and climate change and the fervor of people like Bill Gates and Joe Biden and others who are completely deceived on this. I have no hesitation in saying that. They have been completely deceived about the reality of the issues that touch on global warming. And I'm going to use the book of Job to illustrate that today. Remember, Job says, "Who is this that darkens counsel with words without understanding?" And he starts boring in on Job. Look, you've had a lot of questions for me, a lot of accusations, but I have some questions for you, my friend. For instance, he says in verse 8, "Who shut in the sea with doors and prescribed limits for it, and set bars and doors, and said, thus far shall you come and no farther." It's talking about global sea levels. And sea level rise, according to the Bible, according to the book of Job, sea level rise. Remember, environmentalists are constantly fretting about this, wringing their hands and moaning and groaning and writing position papers about how we're losing land. We've got to reclaim the land, or global warming is going to take it all away from us. Rising sea levels will just flood the land. But what we see here from what God says, this is God speaking now to Job. So basically what it says here is that sea level rise is completely under God's control. There isn't any one part of it that is not under God's control. So the reality is man could not offset God's sovereignty over ocean levels no matter what he tried to do. Because God is the one, according to the Word of God, God is the one who decides how high sea levels will rise. Has nothing to do with the piddly things that man tries to do. So again, going back to Bill Gates, who says the greatest challenge we're going to have, the problem that Bill Gates is dealing with is not the climate, it's God, because God is the one who is in charge of all of this. He's the one who decides how high the sea levels will rise. And so then he says in verse 12, God says to Job, "Have you, Job, since you're such a smarty pants, you think you know so much, have you commanded the morning?" Why do we have morning? That's when the sun comes up. So when you're talking about global warming, you have to ask the question, where does the globe get its warmth? Where does it get its heat? If the globe is warming, where does that warming, where does that heat come from? Now realize this, ladies and gentlemen, there is one and only one source of heat for the entire planet, for the entire globe. One and only one source of heat and warmth, and that is the sun. So if you want to do something about a warming planet, you're going to have to do something to slow down the sun. If you don't somehow stop the sun from working, you can't slow down global warming. It's impossible to stop the sun from generating its heat. So it says something else, God, in verse 22, talking about winter weather, which is what we're all dealing with right now. So we've talked about sea level rise. God's in charge of that. Talking about the heat, global warming, God's in charge of that. Now God talks to Job about winter weather, like ice storms and hailstorms. Verse 22 of chapter 38, "Have you, Job, with all of your wisdom, all your intelligence, have you entered the storehouses of the snow, the place where I keep the snow in reserve before I start shoveling it out over the whole earth?" That's the word picture. "Or have you seen the storehouses of the hail, which I have reserved for the time of trouble, from whose womb did the ice come forth, and who has given birth to the frost of heaven? The waters become hard like stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. You know, we are in a deep freeze right now. Texas is experiencing serious power outages. So have many states. And what God says to Job, you're not going to be able to do one single solitary thing about that. You can find a way to mitigate it by providing insulation for your homes, heat for your homes, that kind of stuff, electricity to your homes. You can do something about that, and you should. But you're not going to be able to stop winter weather. That is not going to happen. Why? Because God controls the storehouses of the snow and the storehouses of hail. And he's the one who gives birth, that's the analogy, gives birth to the frost of heaven. So if they cause a time of trouble, that is God's doing. That's what God is saying to Job. Winter weather, frost, ice, that is my doing. Jeff, did you have something you wanted to interject?
No, actually, I'm just looking. I'm kind of
experimenting with a split screen so we can bring. I'm just kind of looking at that.
Now,
That's all. Sorry.
Split screen, is that what our viewers can see yet?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're looking split screen at Jeff Reed. So we're working on expanding our ability to do that. Maybe we can bring some guests in on a split screen. If not, we can have their picture up there while we're talking to them. So if you always wondered what Jeff Reed looked like, wonder no more. You know, and he's probably a lot better looking than he sounded.
I look a lot better at that angle of the camera that's across the studio. That one's not bad. But this I'm using my phone right now, just as an experiment. I think we've got much better cameras that will at least have some filters on it for our lots of filters. Bobby said lots of filters. Thanks a lot. He's fitting right in, isn't he?
Like that scene in a little too well.
Snowblind.
Yeah. Remember that movie Tootsie where Dustin Hoffman was playing this girl? Girl.
Yeah.
And he was like a nurse or something like that.
Years ago.
Yeah, it was about 1982 or something like that. But anyway, you know, she's dressed up and she's a pretty homely woman.
Oh yeah.
And so talking in the studio, can we back the camera off of her because she just looks terrible on camera? And the guy says, how far back do you want me to go? And the guy says, well, how about Cleveland? So that's always That's always the best camera angle for me. The camera that is furthest away from my face.
Okay.
What were you going to say?
I thought you were still talking in my pronoun. You know, I thought you were talking about me. So I thought I was ready to move on. We have lots of clips to choose from today.
Yeah, we do. That's Jeff's way of saying, please get off this topic and move forward. So anyway, talk about precipitation, rain. This is what he says in verse 37. If you're trying to control the weather or end droughts or stop floods, you got to do something about the rain. Who can number, God says to Job, who can number the clouds by wisdom? Who can tilt the water skins of the heavens? Use the analogy of a water skin, a Bota bag. And the picture is that God every once in a while tips that Bota bag out and pours the water that's in these giant Bota bags out on the earth. Who can do that? Who can tilt the water skins of the heavens? Can you do that, Job, because you think you're so intelligent and so smart? So what God says is precipitation is 100% a God thing. It's my thing. So we can mitigate snow or rainfall. We can mitigate it through reservoirs, through irrigation systems, through dams, through agriculture. But an irrigation system, a system of dams, does you absolutely no good, nada, zip, zilch, if there is no rain. Who's in charge of the rain? You know, if God decides it will not rain, there is no rain dance that you can do to change that. And if he decides it's going to rain for 40 days, and 40 nights. There is not a thing you can do to stop that. So God has promised that he will never again destroy the earth with a flood. The only reason we know it will never happen again is, first of all, because of God's promise, because he is in total control of the elements, and he has promised us that he will never again destroy the surface of the earth with a flood, and he's given us a rainbow as a sign of his promise. So every time we look at a rainbow after a rainstorm, that's God's promise. That is God promising that I will never destroy the earth again by a flood. Now notice, by the way, God did not give us a rainbow to celebrate sodomy, to celebrate the crime against nature. He gave the rainbow to celebrate his promise to protect us. You know, everyone talks about cultural appropriation. What a terrible thing that is. Where here is taking something from one culture and making it your own. Well, for my money, this is the worst example of cultural appropriation in history. Homosexuals have tried to steal the rainbow from God, appropriate it for their own twisted purposes, but God invented the rainbow. It doesn't belong to homosexuals. It doesn't belong to the homosexual community. They stole it, and it's long past time for the homosexual community to give it back to its rightful owner. You know, we've said for years, this may go all the way back to Mark Twain or something like that. You know, we've said for years that everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. Well, there's a reason for that, and that is that there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that man can do about it, even if he wants to. So that is the lesson from today's study in the Gospel of Job. Well, let's take these things and go to prayer, if you'd be kind enough to join me. Lord God Almighty, I come before you in humility this day as one who is unworthy and of small account in your presence, just as Job was. I refuse to contend with you or to accuse you for your sovereign actions in my life. I refuse to darken your counsel with words without knowledge. I thank you that you endow the heart with wisdom and give understanding to the mind, and I seek your wisdom and understanding this day. We together worship you this day as the one who laid the earth's foundations and marked off its dimensions. You are the one who set its footings and laid its cornerstone, while the morning stars sang together and all the angels, the sons of God, shouted for joy. You are the one who gives orders to the morning and shows the dawn its place. You journey to the springs of the sea and walk in the recesses of the deep. You see the gates of the shadow of death. You alone comprehend the vast expanse of the earth. You know the way to the abode of light and the place where darkness resides. You enter the storehouses of snow and hail, and you know the way to the place where lightning is dispersed and the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth. You bring forth the constellations in their seasons, now binding beautiful Pleiades, now loosing the cords of Orion, now leading out the bear with its cubs. You know the laws of the heavens. You set up their dominion over the earth. You raise your voice to the clouds and send the lightning bolts on their way. You alone have the wisdom to count the clouds and tip over the water jars of the heavens. The horse rejoices in its strength, the strength that you have given to him, and the other beasts of the field. You have clothed his neck with a flowing mane, and you make him leap like a locust as he charges into battle. He laughs at fear, afraid of nothing. The hawk takes flight by your wisdom, and the eagle soars at your command. We praise you and worship you this day as the sovereign Lord over all created things. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, well, let's got a couple of other environmental pieces of information I want to bring to you. By the way, did you know that the United States, according to the World Health Organization, this is not coming from me, according to the World Health Organization, the United States is ranked among countries with the cleanest air in the world. You know, when environmentalists write about the air in America, they're going to always show pictures of some smokestack belching smoke into the air. But we have significantly cleaner air than Germany, Italy, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, Japan, Austria, and France. Among the cleanest air in the world. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Nope. You have about a minute left, Brian.
Aha!
Yeah.
I can't even. I got the clock on there. Can't even read it.
Well, it's a little slow because of all the cold weather. I think it's you have an intermittent electricity.
Kind of
it's
interference
probably
there.
Slowed down a bit, just like everybody else in the nation right about now.
Yeah.
Moving a little bit slower.
Well, one of the things this tells you, now that I've got a whole nother minute. I didn't know that.
This
is great.
You only have 30 seconds.
Yeah, because I kind of kicked it away here.
Yeah.
But, you know, one of the things this tells us is that the Paris Climate Accords are not in America's best interests.
No.
We are already outperforming all of the other nations that are in the Paris Climate Accords. Our air is cleaner than theirs. Why? Natural gas, single-handedly. We'll be right back.
American Family Radio News.
American Family Radio.
You're listening to Focal Point with Bryan Fischer.
Bryan Fischer.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point, the home of the fastest 60 minutes in American media. Got the Roadrunner back, so all is well in Focal Point land. You know, you're aware probably that Texas is under the influence of a historic winter storm. You know one of the reasons? They're depending on wind power. And this storm knocked out half of their wind power because the turbines froze up. They couldn't turn. Doesn't matter how much wind you've got. If the wind turbines can't turn, you get no energy out of your wind turbines. Now, and this is what's silly, is that Texas, this is the insanity of the global warming movement. Texas does not need wind turbines. They have 41% of the nation's crude oil production, 25% of the marketed natural gas production. They are richer in petroleum and fossil fuels than anyone in the country. You know, they have 30 petroleum refineries that are able to process about almost 6 million barrels of crude oil a day. That is 31% of the refining capacity for the entire country. They do not need to depend on wind turbines, and it's just foolish that they put themselves in a position where they can lose half of their energy due to a winter storm.
Yeah, also what people are forgetting, the solar panels don't really work when they have snow on them either, and it doesn't take a whole lot of snow to cover those solar panels. Also, the thing about fossil fuels, natural gas, oil, and even nuclear energy works fine in all conditions, so it's very reliable. The problem is Texas has put so much at stake in their, I'll call it unreliable energy sources, that they have to, a similar thing happened in California. When they had all their brownouts, they basically were buying energy from neighboring states. Now, what happens if those neighboring states all turn to unreliable energy sources as well? They're not going to be able to buy. I think, from what I heard, Texas even bought some energy from Mexico, of all places. Why in the world are they doing that? This should be a good illustration
it is.
to the rest of the nation.
Of just the insanity of the whole global warming movement. And by the way, you know what? I've talked about this before. You know that global warming as a crisis, that's not really even about the environment. That is about power and centralized control. Because, and the environmentalists, I'll give them credit for this, they were smart when they set this thing up as a global warming problem. This is a problem that the entire globe has, the entire world has. If you have a global problem, what do you need to deal with it? You need a global political organization. You can't just depend on individual sovereign states to do it. That's why they're big supporters of the United Nations. That's the global power, the global political force that's going to be able to deal with the problem of global warming. You know, Texas in 2015, they only depended on wind for 11% of their power grid. Last year, that was up to 23%, even more than coal. So again, you look at coal, it's dependent, it's going to burn in any weather. Same with natural gas, you can pump it and burn it in any weather. You know, and talking about the way the environmentalists want to go about solving this problem, there's a climate official in the state of Massachusetts said, look, you guys at home, you ordinary people, we're not talking about power companies, you ordinary people driving your cars, living in your homes, you are responsible for 60% of the emissions that need to be reduced. So you, the person on the street, the senior on fixed income, this guy says, right now there is no bad guy to point the finger at and turn the screws on and break their will so they stop admitting that's you. You are the one that's responsible. So we have to break your will. So that's what the environmentalists are willing to do. They are willing to break our will in order to get us to comply. Another story here I've got about how many birds worldwide are killed every year by wind turbines. You know what that number is? Well, it begins with a number from 2012 of 366,000, but then they realized that there are a lot more wind turbines today than there were then, so you got to up the estimate to 538,000 bird, I call them bird blenders, 538,000 deaths of birds caused by wind turbines. But then you find out that most of the birds that are killed by these bird blenders are small birds, so that cranks up the estimate total to 1.17 million birds are killed in the United States every year. Bird blenders par excellence, to the tune of 1.17 million birds killed by wind turbines. That's the only thing you got to remember. More than 1 million birds a year killed by turbines. Germany's another cautionary tale. They're having the same kind of problem that Texas is and that Mississippi's having, and they're the green trailblazer in Germany. They're at the top of the heap in Europe. Germany is at the peak, so they're the wind and solar capital of the world. But right now they can't purchase wind or solar power at any price. Just what Jeff was saying, they got millions of solar panels, which right now are useless because they're covered with snow. So they can't produce a scintilla of energy. They have 30,000 wind turbines that are doing absolutely nothing because the wind isn't blowing. So that's what you get when you transition to all wind and solar power. Right now, one last factoid from Germany. Right now, wind and solar is producing between 0 and 2% of Germany's energy needs. Jeff?
You know what else I find interesting about that? Germany was one of the countries that you listed as having dirtier air than the United States, even though they're doing this much on unreliable energy sources.
And Germany is closing down all of their nuclear reactors. Nuclear reactors are dependable. I mean, not that you don't have accidents with them. Fukushima, Chernobyl, sure, things can go wrong with nuclear power. You know how many people died from the Chernobyl meltdown? 26 people. 26 people. I mean, that's 26 more than you wish for, but it's not like people think that hundreds of thousands of people were killed by this radioactive explosion at Chernobyl. It was 26 people. The death toll in Japan from Fukushima, even less than that. So anyway, I was going somewhere with, but nuclear energy is the cleanest, most environmentally friendly power source on the face of the globe. You know how many environmental gas emissions you have? How many CO2 emissions you have with nuclear energy? The answer is 0, as in zip, as in nada, as in zilch. No carbon emissions from nuclear reactors. You think the left and environmentalists would be all over that. All right, let's squeak in some sound bites if we can do it. Let's go to clip number 2. This is Don Lemon. Kamala Harris, remember, she started that fund or boosted that fund to bail out criminals, bail out people that were breaking store windows, that were looting stores, that were assaulting police, that were killing police like David Dorn. She boosted a fund to bail them out of jail. And here's Don Lemon from CNN, clip number 2, defending her. Clip 2.
After the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis last spring, thousands of people, including Black Lives Matter supporters, took to the streets. Kamala Harris tweeted support for donations to the Minnesota Freedom Fund, which helped people post bail if they were arrested while protesting. So let's set the record straight. There was no bailing out, right? Kamala Harris tweeted about a fund to help people post bail, which is entirely legal.
Okay, well, Don, we're not talking about what's legal here. We are talking about what is right. Clip number 1. Here's Simone Sanders. She is Kamala Harris's spokesman or spokeswoman, as the case may be, talking to John Berman of CNN. You know, the issue right now, the CDC has said flatly, teachers do not need to be vaccinated to reopen schools. Schools can and should reopen today. So here is John Berman kind of boring in on Simone Sanders about that. Clip number 1.
Well, the CDC director, Rochelle Walensky, says the science is that teachers don't necessarily have to be vaccinated for kids to return. And I think people want to know what the White House position is on that.
The White House position is that, and the president and vice president believe that teachers should be prioritized for receiving the vaccination along with other frontline workers. And in at least 22 states in the District of Columbia, that's exactly what's happening.
Prioritize is one thing, and I think there's wide agreement they should be prioritized. And why not? Is it necessary, though? That's the question. It really is a yes-no question.
Well, John, I think the real question, frankly, if I can be frank here, is what you're getting to is it safe for kids to go back to school? And the president and vice
actually
president...
not. In this case, that's not the question. The question is it safe for teachers to go back to school? And that's a very specific question in this case. And again, I'm not sure, I don't understand why it's a hard question to answer. It may be that you want every teacher to be vaccinated. It may be the answer is, yeah, teachers should, if they can, be vaccinated before they return to school, but it's not necessary.
Well, John, I think the president has been clear, the vice president has been clear, and I think I was really clear just now that it is the administration's position, the president and vice president believe that teachers should be prioritized for vaccinations.
That's the word. So anyway, that's Simone Sanders. And here's John Berman, who's actually doing some decent journalism here. I mean, this shows what they are capable of. All right, let's go to Mitch McConnell, who had harsh words for Donald Trump, went to the Senate floor after Donald Trump was acquitted. And remember, Mitch McConnell voted to acquit Donald Trump. And now, listen to this, Mitch McConnell wants to send Donald Trump to criminal court and possibly to federal prison. Listen to this.
President Trump is still liable for everything he did while he was in office as an ordinary citizen. Unless the statute of limitations is run, still liable for everything he did while he was in office. Didn't get away with anything yet. Yet.
That's ominous. Yet twice with a pregnant pause between them. Yeah. So Mitch McConnell basically wants Donald Trump to go to prison. That's the bottom line here. Now, clip number 4. Here's Nicole Wallace, used to be a Republican, and she is talking here about what she calls the Republicans' basic foundation for what they do politically. Clip number 4.
They literally put the Constitution up, which is a Republican shtick.
Okay, so the Republicans push the Constitution. She says that is their whole shtick. Wow. Well, Nicole, if you're going to have just one thing be your whole shtick and you're a politician, you're dealing with public policy, a lot of worse things than to make the Constitution your whole stick. You know, for the Democrats, their whole stick is wokeism. It's racism. That's their whole stick. How's that working for them? All right, let's go to Joe Scarborough. And Joe Scarborough is talking here about the riots that happened in connection with the BLM movement that resulted in the trashing of businesses, where windows were broken, stores were looted, people committed huge amounts of vandalism and property destruction. Joe Scarborough says, verse 5, clip 5, it ain't no big deal unless you're one of the people that owns one of those. Let's listen.
I know there are idiots on other cable news channels that will say, well, you know, this mom and pop store was vandalized during the summer riots, and that's just as bad as the United States Capitol being vandalized. No, actually, no, it's not. The Capitol of the United States of America is the center of American democracy. And while I am a fierce believer in people's right to defend their private property, I'm not going to confuse a taco stand with the United States Capitol.
So Joe Scarborough just condescends to every small business owner in America. You're nothing but a taco stand operator. You don't count. I have no place in my universe to give you any sort of respect. So that's Joe Scarborough. You don't count. You just run a little taco stand. Doesn't matter if it's how you feed your family. Doesn't matter if there are other people that are dependent upon jobs that you're providing for them. Doesn't matter to me, because I'm a liberal, which means I have no compassion whatsoever. All right, well, that's about it for today. We will be back here tomorrow. I am reliably informed that we will be back here tomorrow with another fresh program, brand new for tomorrow. You've been listening to Focal Point. Bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap, and never forget we are fighting a winnable war. See you back here tomorrow.